There's a lot of information that we need to share with you, and so it's going to go pretty quickly. Let me stop this real quick. My mouse is gone. Let me see. So today's gathering is about grief and loss, correct? And so I want to go into a brief overview of what we're going to be doing today. So for the most part, we're going to go over welcome and introductions, which we basically did. And then I like to go through clanship connections. I like to share our clans, introduce ourselves, tell each other where you're from, what clan what tribe you're from, maybe some clan exchange, and where you currently are attending college. So if you could put that in the chat, I did see you all start to share, and that's great. I saw some snippets of, some fun facts about yourself. I saw running and I saw reading. And so if you could take the time to introduce yourself, that would be very great. I shared my clan. I am originally from the Lower Greasewood area on the Navajo Nation. I grew up a couple years on the Navajo Nation, and then I moved to a border town called Winslow, Arizona, and I've lived there for most of my elementary and high school years, and then I moved to Flagstaff. I've been living here in Flagstaff for about 21 years. And so Flagstaff is another border town to the Navajo Nation. And
in progress.
Currently I am oh, I'm getting some echo. Okay, I think it's fixed. Currently I am a grantee technical assistant. I work with a company called Tribal Tech LLC, and it's a great job that I love right now. I've been a social worker for 15 years, and Julio just stated that we've been doing this for a year, and it does not feel like a year. But I love sharing information about mental health because it's often overlooked. There's a lot of stigma associated with mental health. And so that's basically what we're going to be covering today. So right after Clanship Connections, make sure to take a look through the chat. Look at where people are coming from. Look at what tribe they're coming from. Maybe they have a clan that's similar to yours. I know Indigenous populations, we have a lot of clans, and we have a lot of descriptive clans that show where we come from and possibly what our people like to do. So one of my clans is Towering House, Kiani. And so when I meet others, they often talk about the Kiani clan as being, it's my way or the highway, or oftentimes, traditionalists, they look at the Kiani clan as the leaders, and they show respect and regards in that way. And so when I look at other clanships, I often think the same thing. I think about, what are their strengths and what are their roles in the community. And so think about that when you're looking at the other clans. I know I saw Wind Clan. How do we relate to one another? I know we relate to one another, and we have our relationships, but we also relate to, our environments. We relate to our land, to the water, to the mountains, to our plant and animal relatives. And so take that into consideration when reading through these clans. And then you might be near someone who goes to another college that's, similar to yours, that's nearby. So take that into consideration. For some reason, I feel like I can't breathe. So if you hear me huffing and puffing, just block that out. Let's go into, let's go over the safe spaces. So safe spaces is basically creating an environment where we feel safe, right? Where we feel like we can share things and we trust people within our group. We trust that information won't be shared. So we'll talk a little bit about safe spaces. We also will go over a little recap on mental health, self-assessment, hardships and coping, losses. This session with where we covered mental health, self-assessment, hardships, and coping, we talked about that 2 sessions ago. And we went into detail about that, so I'll go over a little bit more. Then we'll go into grief and loss and what does it look like. Basically, what is it and what is the Western versus the Indigenous perspective. And then we'll talk about safety plans. What is a safety plan? Why do I need to do a safety plan? Reaching out, therapist tips, and then we'll do a closing exercise, not necessarily a journal exercise, but I love that you can journal. I mean, you just get a simple notebook, and that could be your therapy right there, right? You can sit down and write whatever you like on this notebook. In a sense, it could be like a therapist, and it could also help you to identify, what was I thinking 3 months ago, and you can look back. And it can also be helpful when you go see a therapist and say, 2 months ago I was feeling this way, or last month this happened, and trying to make sense of some of those things. So we'll go through that a little bit more. And then through the course of any of the courses, through any of the discussions that we have, I always use the terms, you are worthy. If you ever been in a GONA, if you ever sat with individuals to go through a gathering of Native Americans curriculum, we use the term, you are worthy. So it goes a little bit like this. So giving praise to somebody else. And so if you do that to another person, they shared, we give them kudos and we say, you are worthy, right? And then you also do that to yourself in return, that I am worthy. And then there's a third one that says we're all worthy. Oftentimes in Indigenous communities, we don't express that to one another. We don't share or encourage, right? But if you do in your community, continue to do that, because there's so much hardships out there. There's so much, barriers that we are constantly trying to overcome. So share that information with someone and do that throughout this discussion, even if it's doing that to yourself. I am worthy, to get some encouragement. So welcome and introductions. I did that. You can go to the chat, share your name, your tribe, your clan, your hometown, your college. If you would like to unmute yourself and share this information, I welcome you to do that now. If you would like to come off mute, go right on ahead. I always encourage people to come off mute to introduce themselves. Anybody? A little bit about me, I guess you could say. I went to school at NAU, Northern Arizona University, and Arizona State University to get my master's in social work. I've been working with communities for a very long time. I've been in suicide prevention for about 10 years, grant writing and reviewing for 10 years, and just a social worker in general for 15 years. It's amazing how quickly time flies when you're introducing yourself. First, you'll say, oh, I've been doing this a year, 5 years, and then all of a sudden it's 15 years, and you're like, where did the time go? It's amazing. I really appreciate that you introduce yourself. I feel like, we all, I'm sure, love to talk, and we love to connect with one another. Even though we are fearful, we might have some stage fright. I think that building those connections are always helpful. Some of the information I share, my cat's right here. Some of the information I share is from my personal perspective. And so I will apologize right now that if I offend anyone, if I say anything that is coming off offensive, I might have explained something wrong, or I might not have fully explained something. So I first want to apologize for that. Second, I want to say that I'm not 100% an expert in any of this, but I use what I've learned so far in my life. I've taken in some of the information that was passed down to me and given to me from elders and those I've worked with, mentors and peers. And so if you have any questions, put it in the chat and I'll try to get to it at the end when I come off of the sharing screen. For some reason, I can't see my chat right now. But I just like to say that first and foremost. I come from a perspective where I am a helper. I don't take credit for much. I trust that you all will take this information and you will use it to your best benefit. I only hope and pray that it helps you in the long run. And so with that, I like to hand this information over to you. And so that goes into creating a safe space. I know we did some polls last semester and we did some discussion a few weeks ago about what is a safe space and how do we create that. A safe space, according to you all, is building and having respect with one another and showing respect, creating trust or having trust with each other and with myself, having the honesty to share information that goes in many shapes and forms, being honest with each other, but also being honest with yourself, being non-judgmental, not being, not ridiculing another person for what they've done, having an open mind on information that's shared, creating boundaries, healthy boundaries. What does that look like? That can go in many ways and shapes and forms, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides, but creating boundaries to where you're making sure that you're safe and understanding that those need to be put in place.
No, you have to practice with her.
Oh my God! Hurry up! Do something.
Somebody's not on mute.
Corner.
Okay. Thank you for putting yourself on mute. Being mindful of others, creating healthy boundaries, setting up rules and guidelines for yourself. That's basically what boundaries are. What does that look like? Is it, when people come into your home, what is acceptable to you? How do you feel like you're creating respect with one another, whether that's with a significant other or your children? How do you expect to be talked to? How do you expect to be treated? Those are creating boundaries. Compassion, having compassion for yourself. First and foremost, that's very important. How are you treating yourself? How are you looking at yourself as an individual, as a person within your community, as a person within your professional community? And having compassion with others, because others might be in a hard space. And what are they currently going through, and having that compassion for them. Listening, making sure that you're listening to what's being shared. And I know we all like to scroll, we all like them TikToks, we all like to look at Instagram, Pinterest, all of those social media outlets. Or we like to get some work done, right? We like to make sure our notes look good, read over our notes. But I think during this time and the space, it's really important that we listen to what's being shared and also what's being discussed. Having that acceptance for the things that aren't so good, life isn't 100% good. And we have to come to terms and accept that some things might be rough right now and some things might not go like you planned. And so having that acceptance, no letdowns, no use of derogatory language, no use of that type of language toward each other. We want to be healthy and positive. Give solutions. So I'm solution focused. I am strengths based. I like to look at things from a positive approach, but that doesn't mean I don't like real conversations. I don't like, I don't like to beat around the bush. I like to be straightforward and upfront. And so having that forward thinking in terms of solving a current situation to get towards a more positive way of thinking or doing. And then, of course, we covered open-minded, and then forgiveness. Having forgiveness for yourself is very important. We all mess up. We're not perfect. We all do things that are, wrong, even though we might not see them as wrong. We might have hurt someone today, whether it was something we said or something we did, but having that forgiveness to come forward and say, yes, I did that. And having that acceptance that, yeah, I was that way, and forgiving myself, and then asking for forgiveness. That's another whole realm that that will take some time to come to. But sometimes forgiveness can be hard, especially if someone did you wrong. That can be very hard to come to. But I like to look at forgiveness as a way of coming to terms with things and moving through it. So that way you're letting off all that weight, that ickiness, and you're moving forward with your life, and you're not held down with this weight of grief and this weight of resentment and this weight of gossip or negative energy that's just holding you down or making you sick. So safe space, very important. And whatever you said here stays here. Don't be going around and saying, oh, I heard from Jason and he said this and this and this, or, keep the information shared here, keep it in this space. And when you leave this space, you can take all the information that was shared that pertains to what I said, but whatever anyone else said, just let that float away into the universe. All right. So let us go into the recap. So what we talked about, I kind of went through it already. The recap is we talked about mental health and what is mental health and how does that pertain to what we're talking about today. And so mental health is, of course, a component of who you are as an individual. It is how you cope and move through different situations in your life. It's how you address things, it's how you handle things, and it's your thought process, right? The self-assessment part of it is, mental health isn't just one component. Like, it's not just one area that you can tap into that, oh, okay, this is wrong with my mental health, I'm going to fix that. Okay, it's done. That's more of a Western perspective, right? But from an Indigenous perspective, you're looking at the medicine wheel, right? Let me see if I have that slide here. You're looking at the medicine wheel, and you're looking at yourself as a more holistic, you're looking at it from a holistic approach. You're looking at yourself as comprised of many different parts because they all sync together and they all work together. So mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, those pieces are the main components of who you are. In this medicine wheel, I added the other components that are in the wellness wheel, which are the social part of you, the financial, the occupational, and the environmental part of you. And so we also have our friends, our mentors, our supports, and our family that surround us. And I included them in there. Because if one piece of us is struggling, it's going to affect every one of those components, right? If I'm dealing with depression, I might go out on a shopping spree and spend $80 at freaking, what's that place called? I don't know, on shoes, right? I might, and then that's going to cause me to go in debt because I'm supposed to pay my water bill, and then my water gets shut off. And then I don't have money for food. And, it just spirals into these hardships. And so understanding that each one of these areas, they all fit together and they all loop in together with one another. Or what's another example? Maybe spiritually, we're having, some thoughts about creator, or I don't know who you pray to, Jesus, or I don't know what church you may go to, and it's all okay, whichever church you go to, or whatever faith you believe in. Maybe you're having some outs with your spiritual area, and that you don't want to pray. You don't want to acknowledge there's a creator there. And you just said, you know what, all these bad things are happening to me, so I'm going to X that part out. I'm not even going to think about that part anymore. How does that impact your daily life? How does that impact your friends, your social networks, your family networks, your environment? How does it affect you physically and mentally? So these all play in together. And so that's what I wanted to share with you. I got off topic a little bit. Let me see. Okay. So the self-assessment was basically using that same model to go in, and if you want to draw it on a piece of paper, draw on a tablet, draw out that symbol. I'll go back to it, take a picture of it, and you can do your own self-assessment. Quick, 3 minutes. You can go in and say, okay, I'm going to draw this circle here, and I'm going to write out all of these components, but I'm going to write out my strengths in each area. My friends, who are my friends? I'm going to write out the strengths. Write out who they are. Intellectually, what am I doing to increase my intellectual level, or to create a positive sphere here? What am I doing intellectually? I'm going to school, right? We're all going to school. I read, I journal, I ask questions. What about emotional? What am I doing there? What am I doing emotionally that's improving my well-being? Is it going to see a therapist? Is it walking? Is it journaling? And these can all, like you're hearing right now, multiple things can fit in multiple places, right? So write out all those strengths. And then when you come to one that's a little bit lower, like physical, maybe you just have one bold area that just says walking. So look into that area and look at the ones that just have a few strengths, and look at that and say, how can I make that a little bit robust? What am I lacking in that area? And am I seeing something happening physically that I need to improve? Not on the outside, but like, are you experiencing any sickness? Maybe your joints are hurting a little bit more now that you're getting older. What can you do for that? Is it nutrition? Is it that you need to eat better, or water intake? Physically, maybe you have a goal in mind that you need to go to physical therapy for. Are you meeting those goals? Asking yourself those different questions are really important. So take some time to do that. I know we did that in the last discussion. And then hardships. We discussed hardships. We discussed all the different areas, the different discussions we had with the hard things that we're currently going through. We talked about grief a lot. We talked about the loss of family and friends due to COVID, and just in the last 2 years, a lot of individuals went through some loss and are currently grieving. And we talked about how we're coping with those. How are we coping with juggling multiple things at one time? Parenting, classes, um, financial insecurity, um, you know, teacher's aid and writing reports and finals. You're juggling all these things, and how do you deal with this? And we had some individuals share how they cope with these different things and how um, they maintain their mental health as well as maintain their overall wellness. Um, and then we talked about loss after that. We talked about, the loss of loved ones and went through a little bit of discussion about that. So that's basically the recap. And that's the main purpose for today's discussion about grief and loss. So basically, to go into the start of this presentation, we are not perfect and we're always learning and changing. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not perfect. I might offend someone in some way and I apologize. And we're always learning and we're always changing. That's our life goal, right? I am always learning every single day from everyone and anyone. And that's basically how I incorporate positive change. That's just a little disclaimer. But also it's a more of a mantra of how to see your life. So that way, we have high expectations for ourselves, but understanding and admitting that we might not fulfill those, but also on the other side, understanding that we might mess up, we might, fall off of our life goals, but we can come back. We can learn from those and make a change. So that's basically what I was trying to say. So today's discussion, grief. I like to put out hard topics that we we often shy away from. We often don't even want to think about that, right? We don't even want to talk about that. So we just shut it off and we push it aside. But I feel like it's important that we talk about this especially after we've gone through the experience of dealing with the pandemic, right? Grief is loss, and loss can come in many different ways, shapes, and forms. It's not just a loss of a person. It's loss of, and it could be anything, a relationship, a job. Like you were sharing earlier, Aubrey, the loss of a clan, that can be very detrimental. But looking at historical trauma and, our history, the loss of language, the loss of our culture, those can be really hard on us today. And I think some of us are feeling, wondering why our parents never taught us the language, or why I was raised traditional, but I didn't have many family members to show me the ways of our tradition, or things that we should have learned, right? And so you're feeling that loss. Grief is basically the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. Grief often includes physiological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, obsessive dwelling on the past, and apprehension about the future. Intense grief can become life-threatening through disruption of the immune system, self-neglect, and suicidal thoughts. Grief may also take the form of regret for something lost, remorse for something done, or sorrow for a mishap to oneself. So, we can't talk about grief without love. So if you cherish something so much, right, you love it, you love what you have, right? Um, and so when that person, thing is gone, you really start to reflect on what you had and what was there. And I believe that love is an extension of grief. Grief is only an expression of love, and this is how much we show we care. And in the end, we need to learn to live in a new way without this person or without this relationship or without this job or this clan that I was once a part of, right? Um, so I just like to put that into um, the universe, like I said. Um, but I feel like it's really important that we talk about the Western perspective on how grief is portrayed. So they talk about the stages of grief, right? It's it's not where you go through the stages as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like I don't go through denial and then I don't go through anger and then I don't go through bargaining, then I go through depression, then I go through acceptance. No. It's you could go through 3 of these in one day, in one time, and then you might not come to be angry. Um, or another you can switch into any of these at any time when you're experiencing grief. It doesn't go in any sort of pattern or shape or form. And grief is expressed in many different ways, and it's not expressed in one way. It might look different for you, but these are some of the findings after numerous research. Um, these are some of the main themes that have come out. So, denial, experiencing that can look like, saying, I'm fine. We're good at doing that, right? We're saying, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. Um, I know that a lot of us like to put up that shield because we don't want to share that information about how we're really doing, right? I don't want to share that information with you because I don't trust you. I don't even talk to you like that. Like that often comes out. I've been there. Um, having some avoidance. You don't want to think about it, you want to talk about it. Procrastination. Yeah, let me just sit down here and let me just eat because I want to get my mind off of it. I'll think about it later. I'll deal with that later. Forgetting. Um, oftentimes stress and being overwhelmed, you are easily to forget things. Um, I've noticed that when experiencing high levels of stress, I'm very easy to forget things. Easily distracted. I don't want to do nothing, right? I don't want to focus on anything. I just want to sit down, watch a movie, Netflix for like 4 hours, and I'm good, right? Mindless behavior, that's basically the same thing as what I discussed. Netflix, we have so many different platforms, Hulu, Apple TV, and then when we go to Facebook and scroll, we go to TikTok, we go to Instagram, we go to Snapchat, look at stories, and we look at posts. That can be mindless behaviors. Keeping busy all the time. I think that's one area that I've been guilty of is, let me do this and let me, yeah, I can do that. I can do this. And I had a big problem with that. And I had to learn how to settle down and say no because I was just keeping busy all the time and I didn't want to focus on anything else. Saying things like, I'm fine and it's fine. They can often look like shock, um, you know, just numb, no feeling, just straight face. Yeah, I'm good. Confusion, that's a big one. I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know why I'm thinking that. Why? Why did this happen? What, there's so many questions, so many thoughts running through your head. That confusion can often weigh you down. And then shutting down. We all know what that looks like. And I think that some of us carry huge loads, that this can be easy place to go, shutting down, um, saying I'm fine or it's fine, having that avoidance because we're strong, independent people, right? We can do this on our own. We're good, right? I say that to some of my Indigenous women mentors and colleagues. They often talk about this area is that we say we're fine, we say we're strong, but we got to be careful of that because that can be something that could be harmful to our bodies and our minds because of all the heavy weight that we're carrying. Um, and it can take a toll on us physically, carrying such a heavy load of stress or grief or loss. Maybe you're working with community and you're constantly hearing all of this loss. You're constantly hearing triggering stories. That could be very difficult for anybody, but it could be something that can cause some, I did say high levels of stress, and it can come out in your body. It could be maybe you're eating to eliminate some of these thoughts and your eating patterns are creating, something unnatural in your body and it's causing you to have maybe a high level of sugar. So they really do play a big role with one another. And that's one of the areas that I keep reiterating in these sessions is that be aware of yourself, do that self-assessment. I recently gave up coffee 3.5 weeks ago because I was seeing some health issues. I was constantly running to coffee, because I got stuff to do, right? I got to get to this meeting. I got to go drive here. I got to catch this plane. I got to go here. And so I started to see the physical effects. And that wasn't good. So along with my doctor, along with self-assessment, I finally came to the terms that I need to stop drinking coffee. So that's what happened. And now I take a look at myself again and I'm like, wow, okay, that thing stopped and that thing stopped and I feel a lot better. So that was the answer to my physical ailments. But taking on all that stuff was causing a lot. So I had to stand back and say no. It felt really hard to do that. Anger. What does anger look like? Pessimism, being negative all the time. I think a lot of us can quickly go there, negative thoughts, that can be difficult. And I know we had discussion last semester, how do I change my negative thoughts? And again, I went back to self-assessment. I went back to the journaling, get a notebook, write down what are your negative thoughts, write them down and see what your patterns are. Carry around a notebook with you for at least a day. Write down those negative thoughts. Oh, I hate this job. Oh, I hate this. Oh, I hate this. Write down your experience driving to school or work. Did you flip out on somebody? Did you flip somebody off? What does that look like? And then you start to understand, where does this come from? Where does that anger, where does that negative talk come from? Yeah, that's pessimism. I went off on a tangent. Cynicism, what does that look like? Constantly picking things apart. Do you do that to loved ones? Do you say, oh, you're not doing that right? Is it to your children? Or is it to a certain situation you're at, an event? Oh, they could have done this better, they could have done that better, or, what does that look like? Sarcasm. I know this is a tough one because we often go to sarcasm. We go there really quickly to deal with difficult situations, right? We make light of things in order to deal with the difficult things. Be aware of that. And is it appropriate in the setting that you're currently in? Irritability. Are you often irritable? Yes, we can be irritable at times, but is it becoming too much? Being aggressive or passive aggressive, are you making those statements? Are you constantly with your frown face making those passive aggressive statements, not being direct, not handling the situation in a direct way, communicating your thoughts and your feelings towards another individual to resolve the situation? Passive aggressive is not going to be doing that. Passive aggressive is, hiding behind the words, because something's wrong, but you can't express yourself. Getting into arguments or physical fights, increased alcohol or drug use. If those two are an issue, either the law will tell you to take a class or you can identify those now and say, you know what, I got a problem with alcohol. I can't put it down, or I'm feeling triggered by it. Or I need to go to an AA meeting. Getting into arguments or physical fights, is that a constant issue? Do I need to go to anger management to talk about why this is happening? Or do I need to go see a counselor? Oftentimes, anger can feel like frustration, impatience, resentment, embarrassment, rage, and feeling out of control. Bargaining. So bargaining is an interesting one. It can look like ruminating on the future or the past. We often bargain with the past. If only I did this, right? If only I was there to tell him this, he would have changed his path, or he would have done things differently, right? We always say that, right? Overthinking or worrying, comparing yourself to others, predicting the future and assuming the worst, perfectionism, thinking, saying, I should have, or if only, judgment towards self and or others. It can feel like guilt, it can feel like shame, blame, fear, anxiety, and insecurities. Depression. So depression is huge. I hear a lot about depression, and it can come in many shapes and forms, but these are basically the main feelings. Sleep and appetite changes. Are you sleeping too much? Are you sleeping too little? Are you staying up all night and it's causing your sleep pattern to be disrupted? Are you having appetite changes where you're not eating at all? Or are you overeating and you're eating and you're eating and you're eating and not even thinking about it? Do you have reduced energy? Do you have reduced social interest? Reduced motivation? Yes, we can have a lot of these symptoms, and it's okay to have little bits here and there. But if it's constant, or increased and it's overcoming you as an individual, then that's when it becomes an issue. Are you crying more than usual? that you can't stop crying. That could be a sign of depression. Increased alcohol or drug use. It can feel like sadness, despair, hopelessness, disappointment, and being overwhelmed. These are signs of depression. So acceptance, it can look like mindful behaviors. It can look like engaging with reality as it is. And this is how it is right now, is often, what you come to terms with acceptance. Being present in the moment. You're able to be vulnerable, you're able to understand and show some of these emotions or feelings, and you're able to tolerate them. Assertive, non-defensive, honest communication. Adapting, coping, responding skillfully. And it can feel like that's good enough. Courageous, validation, self-compassion, pride, and wisdom. And so that's basically the Western perspective. And then I'll go back into the Indigenous perspective. So looking at the Indigenous perspective of grief and loss, I won't go into too much into depth about, the Indigenous perspective, because we all come from different communities. We all come from different tribes. And even within a tribe, the area in which you were raised or the clan which you were raised might be different from others. And so taking that into account, I went through a little bit of a few points to discuss, but this isn't for everyone. It's more of a questions to think about when thinking about your tribe or your religion, how you do things within your community or your family. So it might be helpful to go and look up some ways, how does your family talk about grief? How does your community, your tribe talk about grief? Is it shared? Is it discussed? What does it look like? And then we often have timelines on how long we can grieve, right? Some of us grieve for a year, some of us grieve for 4 days. And what's the reason behind that? What are the stories and the teachings behind that? And then the taboos with talking about death and dying, the taboos of crying. I know growing up, they would always say you don't talk about those things. You don't talk about death. You don't talk about people dying. You don't bring those towards you or your home, right? And they often say you don't cry. And what was the reasons why they say you don't cry? And I talked about this with an elder, and it was discussed that, the reason why people say you don't cry, stop it, was because basically it was handed down to us that, we got to be strong, we got to keep moving forward, we got to, I want to say, man up and keep going, right? And they were saying that the main purpose behind that was because on different occasions, when they were either on a long walk or in the boarding school, there was no time for crying, right? There was no time for anybody to cry because they would get in trouble or they would get punished. And so you often think about some of the ways and the reasons why these things were put in place. And in a lot of our communities, in a lot of our homes, you hear that term, you don't cry. And what's the impact that that has on us if we can't release our emotions and if we can't release, some that behavior, um, how does that impact us? So thinking about that, how does historical trauma play a role in our taboos? Maybe that's something you can go back to your family and talk about, or maybe just prod here and there. I wouldn't ask straight out. I don't want to get in trouble. But it's a really interesting topic. If you trust, an auntie or uncle or grandmother, grandfather, they'll tell you. They'll sit down and talk with you about it. And they'll tell you the reasons, they'll tell you the stories. Maybe you have songs. And then what are the ceremonies that go along with it? What ceremonies or songs do you practice when it comes to grieving? I was talking to another individual, and he was from a tribe up north, and he was telling me that a long time ago that they used to use the herbs. They used to use a specific herb that is highly marketed across the United States right now in these shops. But they used to use that herb for grieving. And so it's really interesting to hear that. And so what are the protocols that you use? What are the herbs that, because there are herbs that you can use when you are in the grieving process. Smoking tobacco with your family, saying those prayers for yourself and your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit. But I think it's really important that you do go back and discuss that with families or peers or maybe a significant other. What if you're from two different tribes? How do you navigate that? And then going through your environment, how did our environment play a role in how we grieve? If you're away at college and you're surrounded by non-natives and you experience the loss, I don't know, you just got word about something that happened in your family, and how do you process that? How do you go through the moments? What does that look like? It might be different if you were at home, right? And then
Jacqueline,
going back to, yeah,
this is Lonnie.
yeah,
I'm gonna, since this is recorded, can I come back and finish watching it? I have to leave
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
because we're in a tornado warning and we're in
Oh,
a big
no.
metal building on top of a hill.
Oh my goodness.
I'm just
Okay,
like,
yes.
I feel
Yeah,
like
that's totally fine.
put a $100 bill on my forehead and scream victim because it's just like, here I
Yeah.
am, come get me.
Right. That's scary. I would totally just go.
Okay, thank you. Everybody
Okay.
have a
I hope
good
you're
night.
safe. Yes,
Thank
stay
you.
safe.
I know I'm gonna
Bye.
go out and put my tobacco out, and so
Yeah, good idea. Be safe. Bye.
bye.
And then looking at our faith, we all practice different ways. There are many different ways that we pray. And then going into depth, what are the maybe scriptures in the Bible? What ceremonies are done? I know there's a couple of ceremonies that people do, but they vary across different tribes. There's many, many, many different ceremonies across many tribes, different songs and different processes, right? So think about those. And then thinking about, how these individuals that we lost, how have they played an impact in your life? I can think of a couple of people that we lost just this month. Two coworkers and a long distance relative, how did they impact my life? Even though, I might not have known them very long, how did they impact my life? Going through and writing it down. Maybe it was someone who was very significant to you within the last 2 years. That grief might be fresh. And it's going to take some time to learn how to live with this without this individual in your life. How do you process that? That can be very, very hard, and I don't have the answers for you. All I have are suggestions on how to cope and what grief and loss can look like, because I think you are able to find what works for you. So I like to do this little exercise. I like to think of the individual that I've lost, and I like to think about, how did they impact my life? What did I learn from them? I lost my dad about 7 years ago, and he was an alcoholic. How did he impact my life? Even though, we say this person was like that, and they did this, and they did that, and they did this, and they did everything wrong. But not everyone does everything wrong, right? There has to be some strength there, even though we don't agree with their lifestyle. What did that person show me, or what did they give me that I carry on today? So just take a quick minute and think about that. I oftentimes say that my dad gave me the ability to be able to talk to people, to be able to relate, no matter who the person is, and to have that, I guess, joyful spirit to think of everyone as a friend. And that's really, I didn't realize that until probably like 5 years ago. How that's come out in the things that I do. And so that's one way that I try not to look at the bad, and I take the good from what has happened. But I understand that grief can be detrimental, it can be very, very hard on individuals. And it's really important to identify that when going through grief. Do you need help? Do you need someone to help you through the process? I don't know all of the resources, but I know, for an example, we have a facility here that offers free grief counseling. You can go in there and get an appointment and talk to a grief counselor about, some of your losses in your life, and that's really helpful. I've done it. I went through the process, and I was able to come out and say, "Oh, that's normal." And if things became too hard, we went through some exercises on how we can overcome that, and it really did help. So, how did that person impact your life? And what did you take from that? That's always good to go through, especially, I like to use that in my situation, because sometimes it's hard to pull strengths from, certain people. Um, so I use that a lot, and I take that with me. So I'm going to move into, let me go down, creating a safety plan. So when things get too hard, sometimes we might need to talk to somebody, right? And a safety plan, let me share it in the chat for you to go to. Everyone in the meeting. And let me put this information. So the safety plan, you can click on the link in the chat and it'll take you to this PDF. This is very helpful. I create one for myself because, you know, I could go in crisis. I don't know the future and I make sure I have one in place. So it goes through the 6 things on this sheet, writing 3 warning signs that a crisis may be developing. What are the warning signs that are telling you that you're about to go into a crisis? Is it hearing of something? Is it seeing something? Is it an action that you do? Is it uncontrollable crying? Or is it going into a rage of anger? Or is it having negative thoughts where you're just spiraling into hopelessness? And your thoughts are so dark that you are experiencing something that nobody can understand. So you can do this on your phone. You can do it on a PDF. Really simple to do. Write down those things right now if you want to. It'll give you a few seconds to do that. What 3 warning signs that a crisis might be developing? This is for you specifically. This is good to go through if you have teens as well. I don't know if you all remember being a teen and how that was. I remember personally that I would probably never go back to that time. It was hard, you know. Who did I have to reach out to? What was happening in my life? This is really an easy tool to use. They could just sit down and fill it out, put it in their phone, put the people in their phone, save it as the individuals they can contact. So number 2, write 3 internal coping strategies that can take your mind off your problem. And so this is only for de-escalation. If you can't de-escalate and you need to call someone, this is probably not the place that you stop. If these 3 internal coping strategies are not helping you to calm down and de-escalate, then you need to call someone. Or go to get some emergency care. So number 3, what are 3 places or people that can provide distraction? So is it calling maybe your auntie when you have these warning signs and going through what you're experiencing? Is it a peer? Is it a counselor? Is it a friend? Is it your mom, your dad, your parents, your guardian, your mentor, auntie, uncle, grandparents, cousin? Who are the 3 people or places that provide distraction? You can write those down. And then who can you ask for help? So the only difference between 3 and 4 is basically who can you go to who will help you at any time, who will not say no. Because, you know, sometimes, you know, people have suicidal thoughts, right? I think it's one of the innate coping skills that come into play is just to get rid of everything, right? But taking that in and moving forward with that plan of action is not healthy. So for number 4, who can you ask for help if you are feeling or experiencing some of those thoughts? Who can you talk to who will have no judgment, who will help you in this current situation, who's not afraid to seek help for you, and who knows some resources? You can write those people's names down and phone numbers. And sometimes you will need a professional or agency you can contact during a crisis. Do you have a counselor, a therapist, maybe a coach, a life coach, or a doctor? Do you see a doctor? You can write their names down. Your local urgent cares or emergency departments. Some of us don't have emergency departments. We have an urgent care that's local, maybe an IHS urgent care. Look up their address and write their phone number down. This might not be just helpful for you, but it could be helpful for another person. You might come across someone who's in a crisis, who needs help, and writing down these telephone numbers could get you to someone who knows who can handle this individual, especially that urgent care or emergency department. And you can also call 988 if it's a need for yourself. They have people who are staffed to talk to you, to go through the crisis and to find you help, especially if you're in a suicidal thought process, or if you are sitting with someone who is having suicidal thoughts. They're trained on how to help you help them and to get you to the right resources. You can also chat with them at 988lifeline.org, and you can also text them at 988. So it's really helpful. And then write out a plan to make your environment safer. Are you experiencing suicidal thoughts and you have, things that can harm you? Is it running over to Auntie's house that's 2 doors down? Is it walking to the bus stop and getting on the bus to get to urgent care? I don't know, I'm just thinking of different things. Write out a plan to make your environment safer. Are you experiencing domestic violence? And one of the warning signs that you're in a crisis or a crisis is developing is that something bad is going to happen. And oftentimes when people are in a DV crisis situation, they know when their partner is going to lash out on them. Are you experiencing that? And do you need help? Who can you turn to? Who can you run to? And how do you get out of that environment? So writing out a plan to make your environment safer, it might be a little bit more. And there's always the backside, or you can put another sheet to this and write that out. Okay, so this is only to keep you safe. Safety plan. I hope it helps. And I will email this to Julio, and he can get an email out with this information. Okay. Let's see. And then reach out if in doubt. That's always my motto. If you have a question, no question, stupid. You can ask anybody a question. I have 3 daughters. I always encourage them to ask questions because you don't know, right? Just ask the question. You'll feel better. Reach out if in doubt. If you have anything going on and you really do need help, you need to talk to someone, reach out to 988, call or text, consult with a trusted adult, trusted person in your life. Maybe you have a professional in your life, a doctor or counselor or a nurse. Or if at all costs, go to the urgent care or the emergency department, right? Because we have so many high rates of suicides. We have so many high rates of this and that and this and that, right? And I think it's really important to not be afraid, not be ashamed of what you're feeling because another person is probably feeling that same thing. So I think that would be a great thing to do is to reach out. We don't want you to be another number. We see the rates and we see the numbers all the time. And being in suicide prevention, that's a lot of our discussion is how do we combat this? How do we stop this? And so that this is the reason why I encourage you to reach out if you have any of these thoughts that you're dealing with, especially suicidal thoughts. All right. Okay, and then if you are going to reach out and if you are going to see a counselor, I just want you to be aware of some of these things. When seeing a therapist or talking to someone who's a professional, this might look different with traditional practitioners, but it might look the same with traditional practitioners, right? So don't assume every therapist is the same. Don't assume every traditional practitioner is the same, right? Have an open mind and trust the process. It goes both ways. Western and traditional, you have to trust the process, right? In order for it to work, in order for the healing to start. What you put in is what you get out, right? What you put into your therapy session, to your ceremonial process, is what you're going to get out, right? How much heart, mind, soul you put in is what you're going to get out of that. Make therapy a routine. As busy as most of us get, I know it's difficult, but making therapy or smudging or praying or going to ceremony a routine or singing a routine, because we get so busy and bogged down, we often forget about it. Don't let financial costs scare you away. It goes both ways, Western and traditional. Every toolbox is different. Be open to learning ways for your healing process. I am stumbling with my words so bad. Every toolbox is different, right? Something that helps me might not help you. Something that helps you might not help me. But I'm sharing some of these informations to help get those thoughts churning about, oh, wait, I do this, so that'll help me. So start thinking about maybe some different ways, or if some of these things don't work for you, maybe thinking about it from your perspective. What does that look like? Advocate for what you need. Stand up for what you feel is right and what you feel you need. I say that to my daughters all the time. I don't care. Just ask the question, right? Asking a question is advocating because you're getting to something, right? You're asking for something. So advocating for what you need. Do you need a different counselor? Do you feel like this counselor is not appropriate for you? The time limits, maybe it's asking if there's another time that's available. Ask those questions and advocate. Change can be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable creates change. Going through the healing process can be very difficult. It can be strange. It can be challenging. Some things might need to shift in your environment, in your relationships, in your every one of those spheres that you have. Things will shift. And it's really important to have someone to talk about when you're going through the healing steps. Having someone to talk with, not someone to talk about. Having somebody to talk with when going through the healing process, because things will look different. People will notice. Maybe questions will be asked. Maybe some assumptions might be made. maybe you need to create boundaries and cut some people off. And so you might go through some loss when going through the healing process. So make sure that you have someone who you can relay this information with and go through this discussion and why, your healing process is beneficial. So those are some healing tips. This is basically a journal entry. I would like you to get out your sheet of paper. You can do this at your own time, but write this down. Whenever I start to feel overwhelmed by pain, regret, guilt, that's supposed to say guilt, or despair, I will blank, blank, blank. What is your coping strategy when you're starting to feel pain from loss, pain of regret from not doing something that you should have, maybe when a person was alive, or maybe you regret doing something to where you lost a job or lost an opportunity? How do you go through that? Guilt's a hard thing to process. It's often confusing, and it's often an icky feeling that can lead to despair. So write down a coping skill, maybe a couple, maybe a paragraph on how you're going to combat this. I did do a breathing with waves last session. And this session, what time is it? I don't know if we have time for that. Oh, we don't have time. I'll go through a simple grounding technique. I'm sure some of you all have done this before, but I like to use, maybe we'll use the thoughts. Okay, I know a good one. Okay. So I'll do a variation of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique. So I want you all to, I'm going to turn off my camera and stop sharing. And I want, put your feet on the ground, put your hands in your lap, and I want you to first, if you need to go, you're welcome to leave. But if you like to stay for the grounding technique, that's totally fine. So I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to put your hands in a cup. And I want you to imagine that you're holding a good sized, softball sized rock. Okay? You can hold that. And I want you to feel the weight of it. So if you can imagine what color it is, I'll think of my color of my rock. And feel the weight of it. And I want you to use this when perhaps you're doing a mindfulness, or you just want to get some things off your chest. Oftentimes we go to our rocks, we go to our mountains because they give us strength. I pray to our mountain here, Dolgosley, San Francisco Peaks here in Flagstaff, Arizona, because traditionally our mountains are viewed as sacred. Our rocks are viewed as sacred. So I want you to hold that rock. And sometimes our grief can get so big and we need somehow to release it. And so next time when you want to talk or you want to release something, expressing that to your rock and talking, because our rocks are able to absorb the information that you give. And even going out to nature and doing this with a real rock, or to a mountain, or you can even do this with water and trees. whatever you want to go to. And traditionally, that's how, you know, we're taught when I go out and I walk. I often pray to our mountains. And they're able to hold this and they're able to give you strength back. So I want you to hold that. But in the process now, I want you to go into, while you're holding your rock, I want you to go into looking around. You can open your eyes and you can look around. I want you to identify one item that's far, 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 far from you. That could be like the tree line, it could be maybe the sunset. Look far out in the distance. And then I want you to identify something that's a little closer, maybe a tree outside, or a bird, or I don't know what time it is where you're at, or maybe a sidewalk outside your home, or something that's outside of the structure that you're currently sitting in. Identify one item. And then I want you to come a little bit closer, maybe identify something that's within your home. Maybe it's the furthest wall from you, looking at that item. And then I want you to identify something that's in the same room and you're coming a little bit closer to you, but not too close. Maybe it's a couch or the ground or something on the ground, or to me, it's a couch. And then the last one, I want you to identify something that's right in front of you. To me, it's my laptop or my notebook. So that's identifying 5 items which you see. Now, for the 4th, I want you to touch 4 items that are nearby. I'll touch my notebook, Kleenex, laptop, and pen. Those are 4 items. Now, identify 3 items that you're hearing. What are those 3 items? Is it the wind? I can hear the wind on my side. I can hear the clock ticking. And I hear a car driving down the road. Now I want you to identify 2 smells. And that's going to cause you to take a deep breath in. A couple deep breaths. Is it food? Is it laundry detergent? Because I know every Native family has good laundry detergent, laundry fabric softener. Is it perfume? Something you're wearing? Cologne? 2 items. And then lastly, what is the taste that you're tasting in your mouth right now? That's going to cause you to try to taste, right? Or maybe you're eating something and you're tasting that, or drinking something. What is that? Identify that. So for each one of those, the purpose of this is basically to bring you back to yourself, right? To ground you in what you're currently doing right now, to kind of slow you down and center you. A lot of times this is used with anxiety. some people hyperventilate, and I've done this when I started to have anxiety attacks. And I did this, I would go out and I would look out in the distance and I would bring myself closer and closer and closer, but at the same time, I'm breathing and I'm being aware of what's happening within me, right? And so that's a good way of grounding yourself. And then with the rock, you still feel the heaviness in the rock. I want you to take that and fold it within your hands and keep that for times when you want to express yourself, even with yourself. I do that all the time. I talk to myself, internally, and I kind of process things, I self-assess, and that's okay. To go through different things and identify what is your plan of action, which way am I going, what am I doing. But when it gets too big, going outside of that and expressing yourself, because oftentimes, if you hold that information in too much, you could get yourself sick or troubled, and you could feel that physically or spiritually. And so talk to yourself, and then also incorporating prayer. That's always important. In my perspective, is prayer or ceremony. You go out and talk with Creator or Jesus or whoever you believe in. That's really helpful. So I will leave you with that. I really want to say thank you to all of you for being here. I am going to post in the chat the survey link. So give me a minute, and I'm going to go through your comments here in a minute because I see some comments here. Okay, survey. We did a really good exercise last session. It was breathing with water. It was very relaxing. I wish I could have done that tonight, but it would take another 15 minutes to go through, and it was really helpful. Let's see. Okay, if you all could take the survey, that would really appreciate it. I know the coaches would appreciate hearing your feedback and hearing about some of the experiences that you went through in this session. That's always helpful, especially for funding. And I believe you all will get some sort of email for attending today. Let's see. I see some comments about the presentation. I will send out that information to Julio, and also this PowerPoint. I believe I plugged in the resources that I used for those slides. And then I sent the survey in the chat, and I want to thank you all for being here. Have a good night, and I'm hoping maybe I'll see you again next semester. But congratulations to all of those who are graduating, and congratulations to all of you who are going to go into finals and finish up the semester and do good in your education. And I wish you all the best. So good night. I will see you all.